Hello, we're here to debate.
Yeah, I am. How are you?
Good. What can I just get your name, age, and pronouns?
My name's Holly, and I'm 40, and I'm a woman.
Okay, so I'm assuming you use she, her pronouns.
Yeah, I'm a woman. I don't usually say she or her. I just say either. I'm a woman, so I usually
Well, so
say
the
if a
the
person's saying they have their pronouns, I'll say I'll rather ask their name and just call them by their name.
well the pronouns aren't for you. It's for the people talking about you or to you, things like that.
I guess that's what's one of the things that we're going to be debating on that. So I just want to know. It says trans women are women.
Yep.
So what's a woman? What is the definition of a woman?
Well, the definition I
It seems like
use.
no one ever gets that part.
Well, the definition I use would be an adult human whose gender identity aligns with their schema on the female sex. That's the definition I would use.
Okay. So everybody has a different definition that they can use. So the woman is a personal
Yeah,
thing. It's not like
definitions are descriptive, not prescriptive. So yeah, there's a bunch of different definitions for different words.
okay, but you said you as if the
hmm
word woman is only described about how you. So now it's perspective. I mean,
Well,
is that every word
yeah,
in every
definite. That's how
word in the
definitions
dictionary?
work. Yeah, yeah. Every single word in the
Every word
dictionary is descriptive, not prescriptive.
no, you're saying it as a perspective because you said yourself. Like this is what I think a woman is.
Yes,
Is that it's not a
based on. So the definition I use, which was crafted by a very smart friend of mine, shout out Katie, is based on like sociology, biology, neuroscience, and psychology, as opposed to just like Merriam-Webster. You know.
okay. So again, I feel like that is more of a perspective or an individual because if we're looking up a word, a woman's supposed to have a
Well,
definition of a woman.
definitions are
So
descriptive, not
I'm at.
prescriptive.
Well, let me ask you,
Uh-huh.
what is the general definition, not your personal, a general definition. If I didn't know what a woman was, I came out of nowhere, and I want to know what a woman was. What would you describe that? What would you describe what a woman was to someone who has no idea what a woman was?
I would
Is
use
excuse
the exact same definition I gave you before. I think that's
me.
the
And the
best
definition
way to
again was
describe what women are in our current society is somebody whose gender identity aligns with their schema on the female sex.
the female sex. Okay. All right. So let's go back. So what's a female?
A female would be a person who typically produces large gametes.
Produces what?
Large gametes.
And could you break that down to me? What large gametes is? Again, I'm trying
Eggs.
to.
Gametes would be sex
Okay.
cells. So large gametes are eggs, small gametes are sperm.
Okay. Okay. So you say so if trans women are women, they don't produce eggs?
Typically, a trans woman wouldn't have ovaries, so they wouldn't produce eggs.
Okay. So if you're going back and you're saying when you're going about your definition, you use the word female to describe a woman, and then you also broke down that word when I asked for female, it goes back to gametes and eggs.
How did I
So
define? Can
how
you
is a
just
trans
repeat back to me what my definition of female was?
it's very peculiar. I don't know word from word, but again, I'm just picking out the words that I could remember. And what I do remember that you said female, gamete. And then I asked you
Okay.
what was a
So I'll
female, and you said the
so
gamete was eggs.
so I'll repeat them. I said a woman is someone whose gender identity aligns with
Gender identity
it aligns with their schema on the female sex.
aligns with their schema
Mhm,
of the
of the female
female
sex.
sex.
And
Uh-huh.
to be female is to typically be of the sex that produces large gametes.
Okay. And then, like you said again, the gametes is eggs. Gotcha.
Gametes would be
Okay.
eggs. That would
So,
be large gametes.
okay.
Yes.
Right. But then we're talking about a trans woman, if you said trans women are women
Yep.
and they don't have eggs. So
They
what
would
do
be
you say
the
typical?
atypical.
What do you mean?
Typical means that this is
Huh?
what we usually see, but it's not a hard set rule that you must possess this.
Yeah, of course, because some women can't produce they can't produce, children or may not even have eggs. That doesn't mean
Yep.
that they're not a female,
Uh, uh, Sure, but I would say a
right?
female, there is no one like necessary condition to be female. Female would only have sufficient conditions. So trans women can be phenotypically female. I think they would fall into this category. They would not be genotypically female in most times. I mean, there may be some exclusion. There may be some exceptions to that I'm not aware of medically.
Gotcha. Okay, so if that's the case, so what is a male then?
A male would be the sex that typically produces small gametes.
Small gametes would be sperm. Okay.
Yes.
So usually, when
Unless
it
you
comes
want to
to
take
a
it deeper
male,
and go a male is somebody who has the expression of the SRY gene, but some females have an expressed SRY gene, so I don't use that definition.
yeah, if they're like, what's that term? I know the medical term. I know they use hermaphrodite, or I don't remember what the
They don't use that term anymore. Yeah, the
I
term
said,
you're
yeah,
looking
that's
for
why I
would
said that's
be intersex.
What's the
So
word I'm looking for?
intersex would
Intersex.
be
Thank you. I couldn't remember. That's why I said that word so you could, help me out with that. So yes, I understand intersex, which is like 1.7% of the at least America's population. So it's a small, but we're all going to not
it's
discredit someone
actually
with that idea.
assumed that more people probably are intersex, but we don't care. People don't usually get karyotyped, so we don't know the actual number. But of the numbers we have, that would be where it's sitting.
Right. I do agree. So we're going back here. When it goes to male, you said males have sperm, right?
Typically produce small gametes. Yep.
Small gametes. So do females produce or women produce small gametes?
Sometimes.
Small gametes.
Sometimes, yeah. This is why I use the word
So
typically.
So there is on record in medical history that a female or a woman or an XX chromosome has sperm within their body that they produce that are not intersex.
Yeah, sometimes, if I'm remembering correctly, there are instances where people with XX chromosomes have produced small gametes. Yes, I'd have to confirm this, but we do have evidence. One of the things I was talking about earlier on my stream is we do have evidence of people with XY chromosomes, for example, giving birth, even though they have XY chromosomes. We have medical records of pure karyotyped XY chromosome individuals who've given birth. Human sexual development is just, like I said, too varied to make a hard set rule.
No, and I get what you're saying, but if trans women are women do not, and you can go ahead if you have anything in a scientific journal that on this medical history that female is not connected to
De La
chromosome.
Chapelle syndrome. XX male syndrome. They have two XX chromosome patterns, but they develop male characteristics, and that includes producing sperm.
But those would be intersex. I'm not talking about an
intersex conditions.
We're talking about women.
Intersex conditions are conditions that are placed onto males and females. It's not its own third sexual category, not in my opinion. It is just conditions that are placed onto males or females.
Yeah, but again, you just use the word male and female. And this is what
I've never not used the word male and female.
No. I get what you're saying, but what you're trying to like put everything all together. Now, when we're talking about trans women, the trans woman is, and we're not talking about intersex and other these anomalies or things that happen. The trans woman was born a male with sperm, right?
Yes. What does that have to do with being a man? Or being a woman?
Because how is it now a woman? Because
sex and gender are two different things.
They are?
Because sex and gender are two different things.
You said sex and gender are two different things?
Yes.
Okay. So now, so transgender is, you're saying a transgender woman is whatever they want to be as a woman.
A transgender woman would be somebody whose gender identity, a woman whose gender identity does not align with the sex she was prescribed at birth.
Okay. But I don't understand. Why would they have to use, why are they using the word woman?
What other word should they use?
What a another word, because you're
Like what?
trying to make someone who's a I don't know the word. I mean, a word that they can make up. They make up all these other
Well, why would they need to
things that
make up
they
another
are,
word?
because it's, why would they take the woman? So that's
Because
not
they're
a
women.
woman. See, like, see, this is my issue with that. They're portraying a woman yet leaving the woman out when it's now coming to the definition of a woman. It's like a cosplay.
What
If
what
I
do you
think this
wait,
is
I'm
what I
sorry. What do
think
you
a
mean
woman
they're
is,
leaving the woman out? What do you mean by that?
they're leaving a woman out in this case. If you're saying I'm transgender, right? In our eyes of what we see, it is a male that is either transitioning to become a woman by altering themselves with pills and with estrogen, something to alter themselves to become a woman. But then when we ask what a woman is, it's someone who produces eggs. But then if the woman is producing the eggs,
My
but it's
definition
a
of woman
male
isn't
that
someone
doesn't
that
produce
produces
eggs,
eggs, though.
small, you said small gametes, which is eggs,
That's my
right? A
definition of
female. You
female.
said
That's
a
my definition of
female.
female. That's not my definition of woman.
Okay. So your definition, so a female and a woman are two different things?
Yes,
Hmm.
they would have to be.
So if,
Otherwise, every female on the planet would be a woman, and there are female animals who are not women.
mhm. So it's just like basically saying a woman and a lady. A woman is a woman, but now a lady is more of a feminine woman.
Nope. It's defining the sex category and the societal category. The sex category would be, or the biological category would be sex, and the cultural and societal category would be gender.
No, no, no. What I just said was how you were using those, how you were using it in a different sense.
That's
Again,
not how I was
I'm
using it
saying
either.
a woman. No, no. You were saying that well, they're trans. They're trans women, but they're not. Are you saying a trans woman is not a male at all?
Uh,
I'm just
they
trying
would
to
be
get that.
genotypically male. Some of them would be
Okay.
phenotypically male, but some would also be phenotypically female, because phenotype is a
Okay.
changeable attribute. Our phenotypes are changeable.
Okay. So you're telling me that a trans woman is, you say, biologically a male. We both agree on that, right?
Genotypically, they would be males, yes, unless they have some
Okay.
sort
So
of
yeah, yeah,
intersex
nuance. I
condition
get
that
it.
affects it. But yeah, they
No,
would
no, which is
genotypically be
fair.
male.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So we both are on that same thing here. Now, I guess you're trying to say that a woman and a female are two different things. Are you
Yes,
trying to tell me that?
they
Okay.
absolutely are. Yes.
Okay. All right. And so, and is a female and excuse me, is a woman and a female, I would say synonymous?
Some people use them synonymously. I don't think that makes it synonymous, but yeah, some people would use it that way.
No. Okay. So some people do. And what's your thoughts? Is it synonymous?
No, otherwise
Because
every
like you
animal
said,
that is female would also be a woman.
okay. All right. So it's not synonymous. Okay. So I'm just trying to understand this. How do we get from biologically to now having a biological man be able to be called a woman or a female? And
because
that's just
because
because
woman is not a biological term. The
huh?
most you get, woman's not a biological term. The most you could get from woman is it's like a neurosocial term. But woman is
Oh, no,
a
no, no, no. I said, no, no, no. I'm sorry. I don't think you heard what I said. I said we go from biological, meaning the male is biological. We agree on that. Now, when
mhm.
we go to male and female, is this now societal, or a personal preference, or
Male and female would
perspective?
be biological, not societal.
Okay, so male and female
What would be
will be
societal is
biological.
like phenotypes based around male and female. Some of those phenotypes would be societal, unless the only phenotypes you're talking are specifically primary and secondary sexual characteristics. But even then, to some
Okay,
degree,
so
there
I'm
would be
glad.
some societal aspects of that there. But yeah, but I'm not talking about males and females in my topic. I'm talking about about like women.
So you're okay. So I'm just trying to get this straight, just so I can understand, because I'm really trying to get educated at this point, right? Because
Okay.
I'm kind of confused about it. So I'm really honestly trying to get educated, because it's very confusing when it comes to when you're saying when we're talking about biologically, we are using the male and female words. when we're doing biologically, right?
Yeah, we would use male and female as
Okay.
biological descriptors. Yep.
Okay. So now, when we go to man and woman, what are we using now?
Man and woman would be cultural and social in nature. They're going to refer more
Okay.
broadly to cultural and social distinctions as opposed
Okay.
to biological distinctions.
Gotcha. Okay. And now, again, now we go back to, because I was saying earlier, woman and female. And I said, were they synonymous or interchangeable? And you said it all depends, correct?
I said some people use them interchangeably. It doesn't make them interchangeable terms. It's just that some people use
Okay.
them interchangeably. I would say
When they're talking about
does.
humans, we're talking about
Yes.
humans, not like animals.
But if you're saying that all females are women, then you would include animals into there. Human is a
No, I
determining
said,
factor that separates, like, part of what separates women from females is that women are people. So we usually use human in the definition of in whatever definition you're looking at for women. Like, I always start my definition of woman with an adult human because because
you want to be
otherwise,
specific.
yeah, otherwise all female dogs are women, and I just think that gets us to an absurd conclusion.
Okay, and that's the reason why I wanted to ask that question, because I'm like, right now, of course, we're talking about humans. So I guess I could be more specific when we're talking about humans. But again, let's now, since you're saying it has to be specifically talking about humans. So what you're saying is correct. Yes, I understand the women, female. You're right. So we're talking about adult women. Okay. So a woman and a man. Now, how do you use the female and male? Because this is what I'm confused about. We're saying that we're using female and male when it comes to biology, right?
Yep.
But then when we're talking about women, it's social.
Yep.
And okay, so in a society, a male can be a woman,
Yes.
and the woman is I forgot the word that you used, but you said the minimum of eggs or something. I'm sorry. Can you say that again? Because like I said, I'm trying to get
Well,
educated. What did
no,
you say that?
a woman would just be somebody whose gender identity aligns with their schema on the female sex. A female would be somebody that typically produces small gametes or large gametes. Sorry.
Right. Okay. The gametes. But how are you using when you do the definition of women, you are using the word female within that definition. But in that definition,
Yes, but we're
for what
using
you're saying, the female will be back to being the biologic.
so
How
no.
are you
So
able to use it?
you're missing the phrase schema inside of that definition.
Uh-huh.
So when I talk about, I'll break down the definition for you
Okay.
a little bit so it's easier to understand.
Yeah. Please.
So
Yeah.
when
Please. It's
we
very interesting. Yes.
Yeah, so the way that we've cultivated what women are under, like, sociology, psychology, neuroscience, things like that, is our brains just innately have this thing, which is gender identity. Our brains just sort of innately know, or I won't say know, they innately have a correlation to our sex. And sometimes it correlates in alignment with our sex, and sometimes it doesn't.
Hmm.
And this has been
Hmm.
has been changed and warped through social interaction. Epigenetics is the study of how, like, the way we interact socially will literally affect our brain chemistry and the wiring of our brain. Um, so through this, at least I think it's epigenetics. If I have the wrong term, I have the wrong term. But so basically, we have these things called schemas, which is just it's how our brain subconsciously categorizes information, and we have this for, like, almost everything. Like, for instance, me and you probably have different ideas of what a friend is, right? Like, we probably have, like, there might be some general shared information there, but
General.
we
Right.
probably have different criteria for how we label someone as our friend. This would be our personal schemas on friends. Now, just because those schemas might be different doesn't mean that I can look at you and go, because your schema of friendship doesn't align with mine, that person is not your friend, right? It doesn't work like that. Me and you might also have different schemas on what makes us happy, or what love is, or what being sad is, or depressed, or things like that. Our brains just subconsciously aggregate this information. And one of the things
But
it
that
does
goes back
that
to what I was saying from the beginning, the perspective, because that's the same. We're saying the same words. If your scammer. Sorry, I'm sorry if I say it wrong. But what you said is that we have different definitions. Now that goes back to perspective. That's what I was saying from the beginning when I first said about is the trans woman is that's that male's perspective of him being a female or him being a woman. That's his
So I don't
perspective.
like using
But
the
that
word
doesn't mean that
perspective
I
because
have to agree with his
so
perspective.
so really quickly, I don't like using the word
Yeah.
perspective because perspective is going to get us into this weird litany of like it's a conscious choice, but it's not a conscious choice, right? Just like for me, I just know I'm a man, right? I just know it's just something inherent in me. I've never had to question it or think about it. Just like you probably just know you're a woman. It's not something you've ever had to question or think about. Trans people are the exact same way. A trans woman just has this innate understanding that she's a woman because gender identity is just your innate understanding of your sex. It's just innate. It's an innate understanding of your sex, how that sex relates to the social categories and conditions that we place on sexes. All of these things. It's just an innate thing your brain does. So when I say that they have that trans women, their schema aligns with their gender identity aligns with their schema on the female sex. What I'm saying is I have this innate understanding of what a woman is, like this innate feeling that I am a woman, and that feeling aligns with all of the ways my brain has categorized females throughout my life, right? And so this is going to be different in every culture, right? It's going to be different in every society throughout time. Like trans people were different in ancient Mesopotamia, even though the sort of general crux was the same. But like trans people existed in ancient Mesopotamia, but it's going to be a vastly different thing to how trans people exist now. This doesn't mean that your understanding of what makes you a woman is wrong. Your understanding of what makes you a woman is completely right. It just means you can't look at someone else and say that their understanding of what makes them a woman is wrong. Because it would be every single person's understanding of what makes them a woman or what makes them a man is completely fine and valid.
Yeah, I mean, again, you have a good point, but so to push back on that, if I have everybody, well, not everybody, but it is standard, I would say, that we have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, right? That's and anybody who has anything besides that would be considered a handicapness, or if I have astigmatism on my eye, I'm gonna have to wear glasses. There's a default with me because I'm not the majority. So why wouldn't trans people? And at some point, up until a couple of years ago, body dysmorphia, gender dysmorphia, these type of things were mental issues. You don't believe that there's no mental issues?
Yes.
I believe there has to be some people. I believe some people could be born gay.
So hold on,
but it's
hold
just
on, hold on.
defect.
Being gay is a mental defect?
No. I said I wouldn't say a mental defect, but if you're a gender, if you're biologically have the male, in your case, like you said, the sperm, and if you're a woman, you have eggs, standardly, not the other little small nuances, and then now you think you're different. Yes, I do believe that is a mental issue. Yes.
So
Because
okay, so let me just correct
something.
something. Let me just correct something. When we look at
Mm-hmm.
things as mental disabilities, mental illnesses, mental disorders, what have you, there's something that these things must present in a person. And typically,
Mm-hmm.
there's a list, but I forget the list often. It's like your ability to care for yourself or others, your ability to hold down employment, and like basically, if this thing affects your life to the point where you can't care for yourself, that's where we start to get into the mental illness, mental disorder, all that. Now, gendered dysphoria, which is going to be vastly different from a dysmorphia. So like when people try to equate body dysmorphia to gender dysmorphia means that your brain literally rewires the way you think, and like you can't actually access reality almost. So like for instance, somebody who has body dysmorphia may see themselves as fat. Like their brain literally in the mirror, they see themselves as fat, even though they're skinny as a twig. Gender dysphoria is different. Your brain doesn't change the way you see. Gender dysphoria means you see your body exactly how it is. You just have a distress because what you see doesn't align with your internal vision of yourself. So you see what's
Okay, but
there.
you have a
Nobody who
distress.
has gender dysphoria doesn't like somebody who's gender dysphoria and has a penis doesn't go, well, I don't have a penis. They know they have a penis. There's just a level of distress, but gender dysphoria can affect both trans and cisgender people.
But if you're
I
going
could
by
have
what
gender
you're
dysphoria.
saying, But if you're going by if we're going to use the basis of what you're saying, then the word distress in itself is telling you that something is not right.
Well, yes, but
Not
gender
you have a
dysphoria,
distress, or
just really quick,
whoa, whoa,
gender
whoa, one second,
dysphoria. Wait,
one
but
second. I'm
I,
going to be
this
touch.
will
I'm going to touch on that.
yes, but
Oh,
this is
no, go
just
ahead. I'm
gonna
going to let you
this is
finish.
just gonna this is just gonna make it. You don't have to touch on it because gender dysphoria is not being trans. Being trans would just mean you have a gender incongruence, and gender incongruency has zero linkings to any sort of mental illness. This is per the American Psychological Association, right? Gender incongruency, just the act of being trans, isn't what causes you distress. And some trans people don't have gender dysphoria. Some can even have what's known as gender euphoria, where they feel joy in the gender parts of their body, right? So like, yes, gender dysphoria is labeled a disorder, but the treatment for that is typically a form of gender affirming care, whether it be like a woman who shaves her legs because having hairy legs makes her feel less of a woman. That is a level of gender affirming care. She's doing something that isn't needed, but will help her feel more like a woman. We see this in cases of like women when they get older. Actually, a lot of elderly women are patients who have gender dysphoria because their bodies have now started to change so much that they don't feel as connected to their gender as they did when they were younger. But gender dysphoria in and of itself isn't being trans.
No, I do understand that. I was just making a point of what I feel, because again, we can do perspective. You have a perspective of, or a perspective of what it is. This is my perspective. I'm just giving the other side of the opposing, because we're having a debate here, so on the opposing side. So when it comes to in my thoughts, and it's not always 100%. I do agree. Some people may have, euphoria, may feel better with that, but there is also. See, now that it starts to go, now we're slicing and slicing, what the trans woman is. When it comes to a woman, it's not that many slices. You know what I mean? What they call quote unquote a cis woman. It's not that many slices. It's either a woman
It's not many slices for a trans woman either. It's just somebody's gender identity aligns with their scheme on the female sex. That's it. It's one thing.
No, there isn't, because remember,
yes,
you just said too that it's not 100% gender dysphoria. But however, if
because we're not talking about gender dysphoria, we're talking about being trans. Being trans is different than having gender dysphoria. Those are two different things. Trans people can feel dysphoric, but gender dysphoria is a very specific medical condition that's diagnosable, right? Like everybody can feel a level of dysphoric from time to time, but that doesn't make you trans.
Yeah, no, that was that I use that as a point of me saying that sometimes I do believe that is what it is, because a lot of trans women, if you're supposed to be a man and you decide or you feel that you now want to be a woman, you don't have the eggs, you don't have the parts, but you want to dress like a quote unquote woman, what is wrong with being a man that you are? So it has to be some type of disconnect.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. You're saying that they can't be women, right? Because of what is the necessary condition that's needed to be woman? What is the thing that because when you're saying there's a category, and that category is an exclusionary category. So you're saying that there are people that can't fit into this category. That means there must be something that is necessary to fit in this category that they do not possess. What is that? What is that trait?
For a man to fit in a woman's category?
No, what is the necessary condition to be woman? What is the thing that anybody must possess in order to be a woman?
An X chromosome, female genitalia.
Hold on, you can only have one necessary condition. There can't be multiple, because that would make the other ones unnecessary. Those would be sufficient conditions. But sufficient conditions can't bar you from a category. They can only tell you.
Okay, so what will be one thing? But see, that wouldn't be fair, because that's, even if a woman itself, a woman has more than one characteristic. A man is usually just his penis, but a woman has breasts, she has ovaries, she has a labia, she has a vagina cavity.
But see, now you're starting. Now you're starting to get it. There is none. There isn't a necessary condition. There isn't one trait that all cisgender women, that all women, period, possess. That doesn't exist. The only trait you could even remotely come close to is their gender identity, something that's like innately inside. but there is not one trait that all women possess because human sexual development is way too varied for that. So this is why
So
we
what about
say,
what about trans men then?
what about them?
Is there not one thing?
The only trait that trans people, like the only necessary condition that a trans person would possess is that their gender identity doesn't align with the sex they were prescribed at birth. That would be your
A
like
trans man?
necessary condition. Yeah, it would be the same for
No,
trans
because
men.
if that's the case, to one thing to make a man would be a penis. That is one thing a man would make, to be,
Okay,
even
but
men with micro penises. So what I'm saying is, how
okay,
is
hold
this?
on, but wait, we can look at that. So you're saying that
Okay.
it is necessary. So remember, we're talking about necessaries here. When we have a necessary condition, there can be zero exclusions. There can be zero exceptions. Otherwise, it's no longer necessary. If you can fit into the category without that necessary condition, it's not necessary. So you're saying that that necessary condition is a penis, but there are men born with penile agenesis that do not have penises. They don't grow a penis. There are men who grow vaginas, and this would be like XX male syndrome and things like that. There are people who have XY
But you're
karyotyping
dragging,
that have
but you're saying
uteruses.
XXX. We're not talking about XXS. Like,
But
that's
we
the thing.
are.
Everybody, you start to put more things into the pile. We're talking about, because I understand what you're saying and you're making a good point. But again, this is a debate, so I'm also trying to get information as well. So if you're going to use that trans women situation, say, okay, it has to be one thing. It can't just be ovaries, because now all women have ovaries. Okay, I get it. But when it comes, now we're going to the trans men, because this is actually a trans situation here. So now I'm trying to make a sense or understanding. So with men who are XY, excuse me, men who are XY, what is the one thing that they all have is a penis. Even if a
No.
man is born with a micro penis,
No, there are
it is
men born
still
without a
a
penis.
penis.
There are men born. It's
How many
called
men are?
penile.
How many
It
men
doesn't
in America
matter.
are
Hold
born
on,
without a
but this
penis?
is the problem you're doing. We've already discussed
Because,
this.
but now,
Necessary. Hold on,
you're
hold
talking
on,
about
hold on. Stop,
now
stop,
you're talking
stop,
about.
stop, stop, stop. Necessary conditions can have zero exceptions. Zero. If there is even one exception, then this is no longer necessary. If I tell someone that it's necessary to get into my house, you have to be wearing red, but I let in someone who's wearing blue, then it wasn't actually necessary to wear red to get into my house. Right? So
I mean,
when
that again, that's a good point, but we're not talking. That's something that
we
can
are,
be very. A shirt can take off and on. We're talking about we're talking
we're
about
just talking
human
about a
beings.
trait. We're just talking about traits. So if we're saying
Yeah.
that in order to be a man, you must possess a penis, but I can point to you penile agenesis in which men can be born without a penis, period, no penis, and we still consider those men, then it is not necessary for men to have penises.
But why? No, but see now, why would we consider him a man from the beginning? So the next nuance would be he would have an XY chromosome. You get what I'm saying?
Okay,
So
but
there's
see,
still
but the
something
second you go
that
down,
you.
the second
But
you
now
go
you're
down to
trying to
something
disprove it and say,
else,
okay, well,
no, the second you go to something else, it means penis wasn't actually the necessary thing. It was actually XY chromosomes. The penis wasn't necessary. XY chromosomes was actually the necessary thing.
no, that is something that you're moving the goalpost, because now it's like
No, you
what makes
actually
you
are.
a human?
Wait, hold on.
Wait. You're right. No. We're having a like again.
Okay,
We're
I
just
just
having a
want to point out that
conversation.
in this situation, you would be the one whose goalpost moved. You said you must have a penis to be a man, but then the goalpost moved to no, you actually must have XY chromosomes. That would be the goalpost
No. I
moving.
didn't. I didn't say that. I agreed what you said. I said you asked me what it was, and I said a penis, right? But then you have to. It's just not that simple as just a penis, because how do we even know we're looking for a penis at all?
Wait,
We would
you're
have to
making
know if
my
it's a male
point
or
for me.
female
You're making my
or
point
gender,
for me.
right?
There when we're talking about what makes someone a woman, there are no necessary conditions because human sexual uh development is too varied. Therefore, you can't exclude someone from the category because you're never going to find that necessary condition.
Okay, listen, you're okay. How about this? How about we take what you're saying is okay, I agree with you. So if I agree with you on that statement, then what is the point of saying that you're a trans woman or a man if it doesn't need any, if you don't need anything to define it? If you can't define it, why use the word?
What do you
Why
mean?
is
I've
the word
defined it
even being
multiple
used?
times. What are you talking about?
Why is the word
There's a
even
difference
being
between
used?
defining something and coming up with category distinctions. Those are two different
Okay,
things.
so that's no. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So if a trans woman says, well, trans woman, but it's the core of everything, because everything has to have an origin, right? So I think most people are focused on the origin, because that's how you begin anything. There must be an origin. So if the basis of anything that we both are agreeing on, probably everybody agrees, biologically there is other nuances, but we're not talking about the intersex right now. We're just going to talk about this. If there is biological man and biological female, the XX and the XY, those are
people
the
with intersex conditions are male and female.
uh,
Intersex is
but
not a
listen,
third sexual category.
in
It's
this
it's conditions that affect the two sexual categories.
I've heard different. Some people are saying that it's a third category.
Yeah,
Some
I would
like
disagree
to be
with
called
them.
that way.
I would disagree with those people.
That'll be their personal thing. Because if I've heard intersexual people say that they prefer to have their own category because they are unique. So again, that goes back to perspective or our personal thoughts. But again,
all that's doing is saying, hey, if you get rid of all these things that prove me wrong, then I'm right. That's all that does. That's quite literally all that does. It's like, hey, trans women can't be women if you get rid of all of the arguments for, yeah, sure. If I got rid of every argument,
no.
then yeah.
I think it's the opposite. Because if you throw in the intersex, then it blocks what I'm saying. If you I'm taking out, you're throwing in. You're throwing in to make your point, and I'm taking out to make your point. So I guess we're both doing the same thing. But
Not
what
even
we
close.
all agree on, and I know everyone can agree on, is there is a basis of male and female. That is the basis. Anything added on to that is someone's personal thoughts, someone how they feel, or someone how, like you said, in like when you explained to me earlier, was what? Social, right? But
yeah, nobody is claiming the other. Nobody's claiming. Okay, I feel like your whole the whole point of the conversation, the whole argument that you're proposing here, is sure trans women and trans men can be men and women, but I don't have to call them that. Fine, who cares if you don't? Like that's fine. But I'm just trying to tell you that when we look at like neurology, biology, sociology, psychology, they absolutely are. When we look at all these aspects of sex and gender as concepts, they absolutely fall into these categories of men and women. So you don't have to feel that they are, but it's just like,
listen, exactly. But what you said, we've already started. We already had this basis. You're saying we're using women, and those are now social constructs. Those are social things.
Woman has always been a social
biology.
term. Yeah. Woman and men have always been social terms.
Exactly, 100%. So if it is a social setting, I have a choice of, in a social setting, what my beliefs or my background. That's when it starts. Social becomes.
Sure. Let me ask you something though. Let me ask you something.
Correct?
Yeah. Let me ask you something. If somebody said, "Hey, well, we're in a social setting, and socially, I don't have to agree that black people are equal to white people," are you going to be like, "Okay, cool, fair," or are you going to even if you don't verbalize out loud, are you going to go in your head like, "That's really weird. Why would you say that?"
You have a right to say what you have to say, and let's have a conversation. I mean, I'm not that type of person. I believe if somebody wants to be, if you're white and you want to say white power, you can. I mean, if I'm black, I want to say black power, you can. I mean, I think it's kind of foolish.
Do the white people? But you think it's foolish, right? Do you think a white person thinking that way? I think it's foolish. Do you think a white person who thinks that way is using logic, or are they just sort of being racist?
No, they're not being racist because it's self-preservation. You should like your own race. You should be proud of your own race. I don't see no problem with that.
White people who think white people are better than black people are not being racist?
That's how they feel. I know that the black people that think they're better than white people. How is that racist?
Can people's feet? How is it? Okay, I'm gonna move on now.
No.